Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And before we get into the meat of this video, I just want to make a very clear point to you that COVID-19 test kits in South Africa cost 1,400 Rand if you go through a private organization. If you do it through the public hospital system, unless you meet two very strict criteria, which includes having traveled overseas or been in direct contact with someone who's been shown to have COVID-19 through a positive test, they will just tell you to go home and self-isolate. Okay? That's how the situation is right now. Why are they doing this? Because the COVID tests are so expensive. Now, a South African company approached me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, we can do tests which are so much quicker that will identify whether someone's got COVID or not. And not only that, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than what they're paying for right now. And they basically complained that they had sent out an email and a contact to the relevant person, and they had ignored their emails. You know why? Because there's some little BBE company, shelf company somewhere in South Africa that has the contract to bring in all these test kits, and it's probably something owned by, let's say, the health minister, or he might be the only shareholder in that little shelf company. He's doing very, very nicely, thank you very much. He's probably paying about 500 Rand a kit and forwarding them on at 1,000 Rands. Every time a test is done, he makes a quick 500 Rand on the side. This is how it works in South Africa. And what the example I've given you just now would not surprise me in the least, because this is how the gangster state works. It uses BBE, its racist policies, to empower and enrich the black privileged, those high up in politics. So I would not be surprised if the Minister of Health didn't have the ownership of the shelf company, the BBE or the BEE company that has the sole rights to bring in test kits into South Africa. Okay, I've got that off my back. Let's continue with the public debate about this whole thing. And we're talking about the lockdown. The public debate on strategies to tackle COVID-19 often unhelpfully positions health and economic considerations in a diametric fashion, as trade-offs. In fact, economic policy has health consequences, and health policy has economic consequences. The two need to be seen as parts of a coherent whole. In the case of South Africa, the country currently faces three interrelated problems. These are the public health threat from the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic and health effects of the lockdown, and a range of intractable economic problems not directly due to the current pandemic. Now, you'll know that for weeks I've been saying to the government, scrap the lockdown. It's not been taken any notice of in the townships. Just let it do its course and save the economy. But of course, no, the ANC have got their head in the sand. So let's continue. These include high unemployment, low economic growth, and falling per capita income. Any potentially viable response to COVID-19 needs to address all three aspects in concert. This is in particularly important as the country plans for the next stage of its response after the lockdown. Focusing only on the health challenges and not paying attention to the economic issues will result in significantly higher economic costs and will also undermine the health imperatives. My view, is that a protracted lockdown won't necessarily have the effect of ridding the country of the virus, but it will result in unacceptably high health and economic consequences. The initial lockdown was prudent and is likely to have lowered the risk of community spread of SARS-CoV-2. I don't agree. I think it's totally out of control. But the true number of COVID-19, the disease caused by SARS or CoV-2 cases, is difficult to quantify. I do agree. A limited number of tests have been done, and community-wide screening for suspected infectious cases has been delayed. The available evidence on the COVID-19 pandemic suggests that any initial containment of the disease through a lockdown will be short-lived. Also, it's likely to result in a rebound of cases in the absence of aggressive community-wide screening for SARS-CoV-2 infectious cases. We're talking COVID-19 here, just to be clear. Isolation of the identified cases and quarantine of their close contacts for at least 14 days. On top of this, South Africa may find itself permanently harmed by the simultaneous destruction of both the demand and supply sides of the economy under an extended, generalized lockdown. They will have other unintended long-term health and economic consequences. For example, an extended lockdown could result in the undermining of other health services, such as the immunization of children. The economic effects of a lockdown, too, are severe. Early forecasts suggest significant economic disruption from the current lockdown, which is costing the economy an estimated 24 billion rand per day. Preliminary projections by the South African Reserve Bank indicate that South Africa could lose some 370,000 jobs in 2020. Well, that's a third of the normal job loss per annum, which is about 1 million jobs under this ANC government. Gee, they've had such amazing success in moving South Africa forward, haven't they? What a joke. Anyway, projections by private banking analysts based on the initial 21-day lockdown suggest a GDP contraction of 7% during 2020, leading to a fiscal deficit of 12% of GDP, forecast at 6.8% in the 2020 budget. This is devastating. And a debt-to-GDP ratio in excess of 81% in 2021. This means that the country's already limited public finances will be further constrained. Globally, attention is turning away from initial containment through generalized lockdowns to short and medium-term risk-based public health and economic strategies. We present some considerations for a health and economic policy beyond the lockdown in South Africa. In this, we proceed from the following assumptions. 1. The SARS-CoV-2 will not be eliminated in South Africa until either a vaccine is introduced, which is yet to be developed, or sufficient natural immunity in the population is achieved. It is therefore necessary to put in place and maintain a sustainable mitigation strategy for COVID-19 for the remainder of 2020, or until a vaccine is available. An optimistic timeline for this is 18 to 24 months. 2 years. A generalized lockdown, number 2, is not a viable long-term prevention strategy for COVID-19 due to its deleterious effects, including the resultant long-term impact on society, public health, and the economy. And thirdly, removal of the lockdown without appropriate health and economic measures will result in the excess mortality from COVID-19, resulting in further economic hardship. South Africa's health and economic strategy beyond the current lockdown must be designed to ensure good health care and be economically sustainable. We argue that the country needs to transition to a risk-based strategy which offers economic health protection and allows for the resumption of some economic activity, which is what I've been saying, as I said before, for weeks now. This approach has been advocated by the researchers in both Germany and the Indian state of Kerala. Now, just for those of you who don't know, Kerala, which is on the southwestern side of India, is one of the highest educated districts in the world. They have something like 99% reading and writing amongst the population. It's an incredibly incredibly successful little region in India. Amazing, amazing region. Anyway, let's continue. Accordingly, the following objectives should be central to any policy. First, mitigate the rapid spread of the virus while allowing for natural immunity in the population to increase gradually. Second, strengthen healthcare systems to ensure optimal treatment for as many patients as possible, both those with COVID-19 and those with other serious illnesses. This clearly is a problem area with South Africa. Third, protect individuals at high risk for severe COVID-19 disease. That's what I suggested before they had a lockdown. Remember what my suggestion was? I said, isolate all the people who are at risk, especially the elderly who are the most at risk. Make sure that they're completely isolated. Let the damn thing run through the community. Keep these people isolated. They will form natural immunity. And within 4 to 6 weeks, while the economy is still going on, you're going to find that the coronavirus will disappear because everybody's now got immunity to it because they've had it. And then you can stop the isolation of the elderly and those who are most vulnerable to it. That to me just makes perfect sense in a community where you've got townships, informal settlements, and the virus is going to spread. You're not going to stop it. Anyway. Fourth, make economic activities possible with measures in place to manage health risks associated with these activities. At the highest level, there are 3 broad intervention strategies available to South Africa, summarized below. Adapted from a recent article by the leading Australian health academic James Trower, Ben Murray and Emma McBride. We believe that option 3 is the only practicable one for South Africa, and the details of its implementation matter. Now, number 3 says, under intervention it says, relax some measures and manage infections in a very controlled manner while protecting the vulnerable until community immunity emerges or a vaccine is introduced to accelerate community immunity in approximately 60% of the population. Under health risks, it says, careful control required to ensure low risk of infection of the elderly, greater than 65 years, like myself, and others high-risk group. Economic risks. Economic costs will be high, but less than in 2 above. 2 is where you just continue with the lockdowns. Cost of testing and isolation will increase. Livelihoods will be affected, but not completely undermined. A health strategy based on an extended generalized lockdown is economically unsustainable. Well, I think the South African economy has been basically destroyed anyway. I think this extension to the end of April is just a disaster. It is also damaging to public health. Instead, we need a unified health and economic strategy that allows for some economic activity while inhibiting the uncontrolled spread of the virus. This requires a number of health and economic measures to be implemented in a coordinated manner. Now, the problem is the ANC government. Yeah, you got it in one. They couldn't organize a kitchen party. So how are they going to do that? They're absolutely clueless. First, to reduce the rate of infections, the country must have ready the capability of mass virus testing and efficient contact tracing before the end of April 2020. Now, what I said at the beginning of this video is there lies the problem, because one of the ANC connected cadres, and I would suggest it's probably the Minister of Health himself, has a shelf company that's BBB, EE compliant and BEE compliant, and it has the sole rights to testing kits coming into the country. And just imagine what the markup is for that little business. It'll be huge. It'll be huge. No wonder he's got a big smile on his face every time he comes out and makes one of these press conferences. What an absolute asshole. But continue. And don't forget, there are companies in South Africa who say they can actually produce this test kit a lot cheaper and get results a lot quicker. But you see, this guy is protecting his turf with his little shelf company that's making all the money. That's how it works in a gangster state. Let's continue. This must be accompanied, this is the extending the test kits, by a comprehensive approach to social distancing. Relying solely on screening of symptomatic individuals will not effectively reduce the rate of infection because high viral loads of COVID-19 in the upper airway occur in pre-symptomatic and possibly asymptomatic people. To be successful, the scale of testing needs to be at least equivalent to that in South Africa, i.e. 17,322 tests per day in South Africa, eventually testing 1 in 150 people. At best, it must be equivalent to that carried out in Germany, 36,399 tests per day in South Africa. Test turnaround times must result in identification of infected individuals within 12 to a maximum of 24 hours. That's the problem. It's taking them up to 10 days to actually come back with the test results, which again is, if that company here in Cape Town has a testing kit that is a fast turnaround, why the heck aren't they using that when it's a lot cheaper? Sorry, I forgot that shelf company, that BE shelf company. Okay, question answered. Okay, let's continue. This must be followed by immediate isolation and contact tracing. Isolation of infected individuals and contact quarantine must last for at least 14 days, either at home if suitable or in a designated isolation and quarantine facilities. The annual cost of conducting 17,000 tests per day is approximately 5 billion rand. Imagine how much that little shelf company is making. Wow. This is what you call black privilege. There would perhaps be an additional cost of 4 billion rand for contact tracing and quarantine. These costs compare favorably to the daily economic cost of 24 billion rand of the generalized lockdown. Secondly, economic activity must be allowed in a way that is consistent with the aim of preventing the uncontrolled spread of the virus within the constraints of the health strategy outlined above. A risk-based economic strategy is required that balances economic and health imperatives. Decisions on different opening of the economy should be made in line with the criteria proposed in a recent paper by German researchers. This includes, for example, opening sectors with low risk of infection, highly automated factories, and less vulnerable populations, like childcare facilities, first. It could also include areas with lower infection rates and less potential for the spread of COVID-19. Of course, these decisions will have to be based on a careful assessment of factors such as household structures and composition in South Africa and public transport. To do this, the country will need excellent data on the extent and location of any community outbreaks of the virus. Such data will be generated by mass testing and accurate information about the ability of certain sectors of the economy to reopen safely and in compliance with the health protocols. The health and economic strategy will thus need to be implemented in a dynamic fashion, responding to the latest evidence. Well, seriously, if they don't end the lockdown after the initial 3 weeks, which is basically coming up next week, they're going to destroy South Africa. Its economy will never, ever recover. Well, certainly not under an ANC government, that's for sure. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video. Please share this video. And above all, please stay safe.